crowds. Treading water that they drowning. My head on a swivel. Yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 237 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty Dad FF. Our last episode, we were talking about dynasty trades, trying to make sure we are loading up on these foundational wide receivers. Today, we're going to talk about our Smash wide receiver buys from the foundational all the way down to the cheap. We're going to get you covered with the best wide receivers at cost, whole way across the board. Nobody better to do that with than my main man, Snoog. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good, Dad. I'm excited to jump into these wide receivers. I mean, this is a landscape that basically is the foundation of your entire dynasty team. Like, it's the longevity position outside of quarterback, and it's the players that produce a ton of fantasy points. And it's a very deep landscape, so we're going to help you kind of navigate your way through it.
Yeah, and when we talked about it last podcast, when we say foundational wide receivers, these are the guys that you build around. When you have elite foundational wide receivers, you're in a position where you can literally, when it comes to rookie draft, you can do whatever you want with the rest of the picks. And we're talking foundational. We're talking, obviously, the big three, Jefferson, Chase, and Lamb. But then we're also including Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Harrison, Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, and we're getting to that area. These are the guys that we consider to be foundational wide receivers. They're the guys that you literally build around to make sure that your team, Snoog, especially with the 2025 class, with those running backs that are going to be coming in, if you tier up now to some of these foundational wide receivers, it's going to set you up for success for Dynasty for the long term, because you're going to add some running backs that look like Bijan, that look like Gibbs. We're not talking about a class where it's like a bunch of Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson. We're talking about some real upside top 5 Dynasty type running backs.
Yeah, exactly. That's literally just what it comes down to at the end of the day. Don't get me wrong. I could talk about Jahmyr Gibbs all day. He's one of my favorite players in the league in general, but I would love to just turn him into a Garrett Wilson plus if you can, or into A.J. Brown plus, and that's kind of the way to do it. So,
yeah, for sure. So what I would like to do first is I want to talk about, those are our foundational guys, but I want to talk about some guys that you and I, there's 4 guys that you and I both think have the ability, have the upside to join that foundational group. I think Chris Olave is obviously in that conversation as well. But for me, the first guy I want to bring up, and I know we have very similar thought process when it comes to guys that we think are foundational. For me, it's someone that I think has fallen down boards a little bit, but Malik Neighbors has the talent to be a foundational wide receiver. So many people are trying to discount him because he went to the Giants. I think he's going to get absolutely peppered year 1. And this is someone that we comp to Jamar Chase. So why are we moving him outside the top 10 for a lot of people? Keep Trade Cut has him as wide receiver 9. You and I both have him as wide receiver 9. But there's a lot of websites out there that have him outside the top 12. And it's like, I understand wanting to win. I understand, taking shots on a Tyreek Hill or a Brandon Ayuk. But I think Malik Neighbors is someone that, if you buy him, if you put him into your roster, this is someone that right now you can buy at wide receiver 2 prices, who is an alpha wide receiver 1 type that I think enters that what I would say is foundational. He's not quite there yet, but he's real close. Who's another guy for you that, by the end of the year, you're like, I think this guy is a clear-cut top 8 type foundational wide receiver?
Drake London for me. I think he's a guy that, with Kirk Cousins, if Kirk plays 15 to 16 games minimum this year, even 14, we could see London go for 1,200 to 1,400 plus yards and score double-digit touchdowns. The talent's there, the draft capital's there. He's 22 years old. If he gets that sort of production, his value is going to jump through the roof and be a guy that is viewed as that top 5 to 8 dynasty wide receiver.
I'm going to hit you real hard here. I'm going to do a little keep trade cut with A.J. Brown, Malik Neighbors, and Drake London. Right now, they are the wide receiver 8, 9, and 11 on Keep Trade Cut. We have them similarly ranked. So if you're doing a startup right now, who you taking? If you're a contender, who you taking? How you doing this Keep Trade Cut? Let's talk about it from a couple different angles, because I don't think it's quite as clear cut as like this guy or that guy.
I think it is for me for A.J. Brown. I think I'd keep A.J. Brown 10 times out of 10, regardless of the team. 26 years old still, back-to-back 1,400-plus yard seasons, top 5 finishes. He has wide receiver 1 overall upside any given moment, and he can finish as the wide receiver overall 1 upside guy like any year. So that's the thing with him. He could give you 40 points one week. He could give you 380 fantasy points in a year. He has all the talent in the world. I don't think he's even hit his true potential yet, and he's tied in an elite offense with Jalen Hurts. I would go with, my gut wants to tell me to trade Drake London. Like, I think I'm at this point now where I might take London over Neighbors, just with quarterback situation, team, all that. It's so close for me, but it's just, I love Malik Neighbors, man. Like, he is phenomenal, but it's just, can Danny Dimes get him to that tier where he's outproducing Drake London and they're like the same age? Probably not. So I think I'd go trade London and cut Neighbors, and I think I'd be pretty set in stone with those decisions.
So for me, I'm gonna take Neighbors over London, because the way I look at it is London's floor, what we just saw him do with the Falcons in back-to-back seasons with poor quarterback play, that's what we're gonna see at minimum from Malik Neighbors, right? He's younger. We have him at that age. I believe he's just 21 years old. So 2 years from now, if Malik Neighbors has the 2 type seasons that Drake London has, and then he gets an upgrade of a Kirk Cousins type quarterback, I think he has the ability to go higher than what Drake London is from an explosive standpoint, from a dynasty standpoint. But I'm with you there. I mean, I think if you can go and move around there and you can get a plus on top of any of these guys, and I do think league to league, I think you can get Neighbors in a second for A.J. Brown. And I think you can get London in a second for Malik Neighbors, depending on what your leagues are. Go out there and kick the tires. We've been saying this a lot lately, but, you miss every trade you don't take a shot at.
Exactly.
Like a lot of times people just throw out random trades and they just spam them. And that's not what we're talking about. We're saying, hey, you know what? Like, I'm interested in Malik Neighbors. What are you looking at? Start to have those conversations. Dynasty trades are so much more like business transactions and having friendly relationships rather than just knowing values, because you can know the values, but you have to be able to execute the trades. And to do that, you need to have conversations. You need to talk to, the guys that you're trying to move around with, and just say, hey, I have Puka Nacua. I see you're ready to win. Would you give me Malik Neighbors in a second for him? That's how you smash trades. That's how you get better and insulate. That's how you go from an angle of, I think you'll be better with Puka. I'll be better with Malik in the second because I'm not contending, and a lot of times people are just trying to fleece people in trades, or, they say that since we're smash accept, we're talking about just trades where we dominate. Those aren't the trades that create good leagues. It's the leagues where you both get what you want. You know what I mean? So that's something big that, especially at the wide receiver position, because you mess up on a big wide receiver trade, Snoog, it could be 5 years where you're watching someone that balls out. If you trade Tyreek Hill for the next guy that I'm going to talk about, Rome Odunze, and Rome takes off, you're going to be kicking yourself. Rome Odunze, I think, has the skill set to be a foundational wide receiver. He is one DJ Moore injury away from instantly jumping into the top 10, right?
Exactly.
Keenan Allen is going to be that wide receiver 2. He's going to be solid. No matter who's there. When they drafted Rome, he's in that spot. When it was just DJ Moore, he's in that spot. He's in the twilight of his career. Great wide receiver. But I think Rome Odunze, if DJ Moore were to go down, is going to jump into an alpha type role and could see a Jamar Chase type rise, right? Like, we keep talking about it. He's not JSN. He's better than JSN. He has a higher ceiling. This is a scenario where he has an elite quarterback. You want all the Rome Odunze shares you can get because he's tied to Caleb Williams. And I think people are starting to discount. I got him in multiple drafts at the 108, and I just don't see it. Like my new rankings, I have him the 105. I'm not coming off that right now. I've gone to a spot where if I have the 105 and I don't need a quarterback, I'm taking him over McCarthy in May, because I think that's where we're at. And I think I'm safe to move back to 8 if I want one of those quarterbacks. But if I'm at 5, I think I'm going ahead and I'm taking Rome Odunze.
Yeah, exactly. He's the guy that we've loved throughout the process. Like, we've always had him so much higher, just over the quarterbacks in general. He's my 105 as well, right behind Drake May. I think Rome Odunze is a guy that checks every single box you can think of. Doesn't have literally you can't find a weakness in his profile. Besides, maybe you could argue he's a 4th-year guy. And his yards per team pass attempt, the numbers are lower. Okay, he played on a team with 3 wideouts that got drafted day 2 or better. One of the best wide receiver rookies ever, Puka Nacua, when he was on Washington, and Rome didn't have a freshman year. So that's why he stayed another year. He's still 21. He is literally, he checks the main boxes we look for, and that's elite quarterback play, draft capital, production profile coming out as a prospect, and combine numbers. Like, he checks every single box, and he's in the top end of all of those. He's that elite route runner. He's that guy that can make that big jump, even year one. Like, he's not JSN. He plays the outside. He's an Alpha X. He's not going to be the odd man out. I've said this many times. It's probably going to be Keenan Allen because he's more of that slot Z type of player. Rome Odunze is going to absolutely dominate. Maybe if it doesn't come in year one, it's going to be year 2 or year 3 breakout. But he's going to be good enough in year 1 and year 2 where his value holds, and if not, he rises in value. So
we're talking about the 25 class, and we're just trying to get you guys out ahead of how good these running backs are and how good this is. Snoog, if you are, you're still building, you're not going to compete in 2024. You're looking at 2025, and you have multiple firsts, and I'm not saying trade your first, but if you have a pick that's sitting there at the 104, 105 potentially for next year, would you rather have the 104 next year or Rome Odunze this year?
Rome.
Yeah. That's what I've been saying to people is go ahead and trade that mid first for Rome now. Add, I would even be willing to add someone in that, and I know you're going to hate it because I say Dontavian Wicks, but someone in that mid second range, late second. Obviously, we're not advocating Wicks, but I'm saying that would be like the ceiling. If I could give up a mid-first and Keenan Allen to a contender to get Rome Odunze for next year, we keep talking about it. We want to fill these wide receiver positions with foundational guys. We want to have an elite tight end. And then next year, this year I'm starting Kendre Miller. I'm starting, like every running back under the sun who's not going to score me a lot of points. And then next year, I'm filling them in with Ollie. I'm filling them in with Henderson. I'm filling them in with all these running backs. Now, all of a sudden, you are set to dominate for the next 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. That's you just nailed it on the head there. I mean, we talked about it in the last pod, just knowing the strengths of classes. 2024's wideouts were clearly the strength. Take advantage of that. Rome Odunze would be, you could argue he would probably be 101, 102, or 103 next year.
Well, that's the tricky part, right? And that's where I'm looking at is like next year's class. I mean, there are a few quarterbacks. I think Shador and Beck, and there's some guys that are going to be up there, and there's some wide receivers like Burden, and I think there's some running backs. But I think if you take a shot at a mid for Rome, I think a lot of people would still do it. If you throw them that other piece has to be someone that they think they're going to get points from. A DeAndre Hopkins, a Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley. I'm perfectly fine doing that because then you go and you take what we call sometimes like they're not roster cloggers, but they're guys that aren't really doing anything for you.
Yeah.
Package them up, get yourself a Rome Odunze for that foundational wide receiver. And there's one more guy, right? There's one more guy that you and I are both in on who could easily approach top 12 status. Like we see the elite ceiling, we see the path to production. Why should we be buying Senor Pickens?
Because he's NFL young boy. Nah, because he is just one of those guys that, I mean, he had like 1,200 yards with like Kenny Pickett and the monkey puppets over there in Pittsburgh. They finally get an established veteran quarterback that's competent enough to throw the ball and throw for like 3,800 to 4,000 yards. Pickens is going to be the guy that accumulates most of those yards coming out of the air. So for me with him, talent was never the issue. It was always just quarterback play. He finally gets the quarterback play. He's in a wide open room. Like, he is the clear alpha in Pittsburgh. Russ loves those type of wideouts, those big, fast, athletic guys that win downfield. Look what he did with Sutton. Look what he did with DK Metcalf. George Pickens is better than Sutton, and he's on DK Metcalf's level. If not, he's better at like the acrobatic, like contested catch situations and just making plays downfield. He's not as good as an athlete, but he's a good athlete still. Pickens is a guy that I truly think can hit that 1,200 to 1,400 yard ceiling this year with like a floor of like 1,100, 1,200 yards. Like, I think he's penciled in to be a guy that finishes top 15, and he's going to take that big jump.
I'm looking at Dynasty Trade Calculator. I'm looking at DLF. I'm looking at Keep Trade Cut. I have him ranked at 21. That's higher than everyone else. Everyone else across the board for your major Dynasty sites have him as wide receiver 27, Snoog. Behind Worthy, behind JSN, behind Addison, behind Zay Flowers, behind Tank Dell. I just think the ceiling is there. The youth is there. how high do you have him? And, what are some trades that, you don't love Jordan Addison? Let's just say it that way. All the major sites have him as wide receiver 21, 22,
Yep.
which is where I have Pickens. So if you have Addison, sell me on a deal to get George Pickens. Like, how are you making those kind of deals off of Tank Dell, Jordan Addison, DK Metcalf, T. Higgins? Those are guys that I would say are wide receiver 2s on their team. How are we going about trying to get George Pickens?
Yeah, so first off, I have Pickens in a tier with Pittman, Higgins, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. I'm
we have him up in that borderline 20 range, and that's everyone else has him at 27 to 30.
I think, like, if you told me that George Pickens was valued over every single one of those guys going into next year, I wouldn't be shocked. Like, I truly think George Pickens can be better than Michael Pittman. I think he's a better talent than Michael Pittman is. I think he can get to be a better Pittman version, or he could be like a better T. Higgins. He's definitely deserves to be in the tier. Those guys all deserve to be in that tier. I think if Tank Dell didn't get Diggs, it would probably be Pickens and Tank Dell leading that tier. I think Tank Dell is just phenomenal route runner. Jordan Addison, though, I think I'd comfortably take Pickens way ahead of him. Like, he's like the third option on his team with like J.J. McCarthy, a rookie quarterback that we don't know much about. Like, we haven't even seen him throw the ball more than like 10 times a game. Don't get me wrong, JJ's a good player. I thought he would be a good pro. I think he's like that high-end game manager type of quarterback, but I don't think him as a rookie is good for Jordan Addison, especially when he has a Hawkinson who's an easy safety blanket and a Justin Jefferson there when Pickens is just a clear number one option. That's what it comes down to. And same with Nico Collins. Like, he's fighting with two other star receivers for targets, and then Pittman. T. Higgins might not even play this year. Like, might opt out. Who knows? And then Pittman, another guy. Adonai Mitchell, they bring him in. He's that explosive vertical guy. And then you got Josh Downs there. You got a healthy JT back. You got Richardson, who we only played 3 games with last year. So a lot to change in that tier. But
so let's talk about a couple trades here, because this is what I really want to focus in on is that the group that I have higher than them. And I'm with you. Nico Collins, DK Metcalf, Pickens, Dell. That's that kind of tier. The tier above that, and I do have Pittman a little bit higher, and I understand your trepidation on him a little bit. But let's talk DJ Moore, Jaylen Waddle, DeVonta Smith, Brandon Ayuk. I think all of those guys are way too cheap in Dynasty. They're all 25, 26 years old. You could throw T. Higgins in that area. Would you rather have DJ Moore or George Pickens in a 25-second?
Pickens. That's close, though.
Okay.
It's just the Tank Dell shit for me again. It's like DJ Moore just got so screwed with this situation. He had the best situation, and now he's got Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze joining him.
What about Jaylen Waddle? Jaylen Waddle or Pickens in a second?
I'd take Waddle. So I have Ayuk, Smith, Waddle, Rome, and DJ Moore ahead of Pickens.
Yep.
But Pickens is right after that group of guys.
Yeah.
Like you said, we have London and Rome as those potential foundational assets.
These are those guys.
Pickens is that next guy.
For me, Ayuk, Smith, Waddle, and Moore are in a tier where it's like, and with Rome, Rome's younger. But those guys are like really good dynasty buys. Like, when I'm in a startup, I keep finding myself moving back out of the third and moving into the fourth and fifth and getting multiple shares of DeVonta Smith, Jaylen Waddle, and Brandon Ayuk. Jaylen Waddle, let's start with him. He is a Tyreek Hill injury away from posting a top 5 season. Like, I think that is in the realm of possibility. He was wide receiver 8. That was the highest he's been. He has wide receiver. I mean, situation has made him cheaper. DeVonta Smith is an A.J. Brown injury away from doing the same thing. Situation has made him cheaper. Brandon Ayuk, we've seen as a top 12 wide receiver. DJ Moore, we've seen as a top 12 wide receiver. These are guys that they're not foundational anymore because they're in that 25, 26-year-old range, but they are the guys that I absolutely love as my wide receiver 2, right? Because if I have a little bit riskier wide receiver 1, like, Garrett Wilson or Marvin Harrison Jr., and I can have DeVonta Smith or Jaylen Waddle or even Brandon Ayuk as my wide receiver 2, now all of a sudden I have a floor to go with the ceiling on another guy there. And sometimes, it's a matter of just, you want to pair that together, right? Like, if I have Jefferson, then I can take a riskier shot on my wide receiver 2 in a startup.
Yeah.
Then I can take Rome. Then I can take Pickens. If I have, the Garrett's my wide receiver 1, or, Olave's my wide receiver 1, now I want a stable wide receiver 2. I want an Ayuk. I want a Smith. I want a Waddle, and I want a DJ Moore. Those 4 guys are way too cheap in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Waddle's a guy that played like 12 and a half, 13 games last year and had close to 200 points. So, like, even though it seemed like a down year for Waddle, still hit 1,000 yards. He was pacing to have one of his best seasons yet. Even if he just played those 4 or 5 more games fully healthy, he probably would have been in that like 260 to 270 point range if he just averaged what his points per game was. So he's a guy that's always just really safe. I mean, 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Same with DeVonta Smith, another guy. Just that very elite talent that's just playing that 1B role in an elite offense. Those 2 guys alone are just guys that you can always guarantee are going to give you the production that you're looking for from them at value.
And on a team now that I'm kind of shifting from, I'm shifting from being elite into building. And I made a trade the other day and I wanted to kind of get your opinion on it. But I traded Tyreek Hill for Jaylen Waddle in the 25-second. And I'm just like, I feel like I'm losing a little bit of that elite ceiling, but I'm buying a really nice floor with longevity.
Exactly. Yeah, that's literally what it comes down to. And if A.J. Brown or Tyreek Hill were to go down with injury, you're going to get a top 5 to 8 wideout. So
yeah. And then when you look at things in our Patreon, and if you look at my rankings, I mean, we talked about those foundational guys. I have Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, and Malik Neighbors in a tier worth the 103 to 104. The 105, I have Olave, Tyreek Hill, and Drake London. And a lot of you guys are always asking, Dad, what's the trade equivalent? And that's why we break down in my rankings, like, this is where you can see what kind of value you have. The 106, 107, this is where I want to see if you would rather the 106 or these players. So that's that same area. Ayuk, Smith, Waddle, Odunze, Moore. Would you rather the 106 or the players?
I would take Odunze 105, so there you go.
Yeah.
I'd take Ayuk
so Bowers
over
or these guys?
I'd take them all over. But I actually traded Bowers in a 0.5 tight end premium league for DeVonta Smith and the 209.
Yeah, I think you can get the plus there, and that's where when we're looking at rookie drafts,
give me Smith.
Especially if you don't need a quarterback at this point, 7 and 8 really just keep falling to be either May, Bowers, or McCarthy. It's really just falling that way time and time again. So if you don't need those positions, these wide receivers are really going to be there. For me, the 108 to 109, I have Pittman, Nico, Metcalf, Pickens, Addison. This is a big tier. Higgins, Flowers, Tank Dell, and Xavier Worthy. And I think that tier there is very comparable to what you can get. Would you rather have Xavier Worthy or Zay Flowers? You get into an area where it's like, would you rather have Xavier Worthy or Jordan Addison? And it's a very simple area when you're at that 109 to try to make those kind of decisions. Tier 6, 110 to 112, and I'm gonna key in on these 4 guys here, and I want to kind of get your take, because this is an area where, are you trying to tier up from these guys? Actually, it's 5 guys. You're trying to tier up from these guys. You're trying to buy these guys. For me, it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, Deebo Samuel, Jaden Reed, Lad McConkey, and Brian Thomas. So these are 5 guys that I probably get the most questions on about what to do in Dynasty. What do you do with these particular guys? Are you trying to take Lad McConkey and add a first and get up to Rome Odunze? Are you trying to take, Jackson Smith and Jigba and add a second to get up to George Pickens? Are you trying to take Jaden Reed and add 2 firsts to get up to A.J. Brown? What are you trying to do with this area? Because these are the guys that, for me, if they're my wide receiver 4, I'm like flex 1, flex 2, I feel great. If they're my wide receiver 3, I'm okay. If they're my wide receiver 2, I'm a bit worried.
Yeah, it's crazy how deep the landscape is, because just the players you just mentioned.
We're at 32 right now.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I think all of those guys, like any of those guys, could be breakout candidates. I think Jaden Reed's a guy that doesn't belong in that tier for me personally. I think he's just being a little overvalued just for like what he is as a talent, and like a little bit of a crowded room.
I'm glad you brought that up, because then when you get down to tier 7, you get to players 33 to like 36. And we're going to talk about them a little bit here, but it drops off talent-wise for the youth. It becomes Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Keon Coleman. Like, in that range, now you're saying, okay, well, Jaden Reed definitely is worth more than that area, and that's my tricky thing. Is there a lot of times my rankings, I'm not looking at what are you going to do, what have you done? It's what's your market value right now, because I'm a volume trader. I'm trying to make trades and give you a snapshot of what right now is. That's why on the Patreon I'm updating that so often.
Yeah, exactly. I think JSN and Brian Thomas Jr. and Ladd are the three guys in there that could make a big jump. I think Debo's just at the point in his career where he can't really gain any value. Like he could finish top 10 again, and like he's still gonna probably be less valued next year just because of
I bought him
age,
for the 201
longevity.
the other day. I felt pretty good about it.
That's great value. He's just like in that Adams Evans tier. I just keep
Mhm.
buying him and ride him into the sunset.
Right.
But I think Thomas, Ladd, and JSN can take that big jump. Like if they do hit their ceilings to like a next tier, or the tier after that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if all the pieces fall together, because those are all guys less than 22 years old still. They were all good profiles, had good production. They went to Power 5 schools. So
You're gonna hate me here because almost have Keon Coleman in this area. Well, I'm
Really?
gonna tell you what I've been doing, and I want to get your opinion because I did it 2 different times. One of them was Brian Thomas and a 25 second for Keon Coleman and a 25 first. The other was the same thing in Ladd McConkey. So I just see them as like, I think Ladd has the safest floor of the 3. Brian Thomas's junior talent ceiling is phenomenal. Keon Coleman's situation from a dynasty perspective is going to, I think, if you told me he had 10 touchdowns this year, I would believe you. You know what I mean? Like that's where I'm like, if I can do that 1-2 switch, knowing next year how good the 25 firsts are, that's a move where I'm like, I'm okay. Because if you told me that Coleman scored more than Ladd and more than Worthy year 1, I would not really be shocked. And I think he's going to start to build his way up. There is the flip side of that though too, where he is what a lot of people thought he was ahead of time. So would you trade Ladd McConkey and a second or Keon Coleman in a first?
I think I would, and I'd flip Keon for something that like I'd be more comfortable with. That type of situation's just tough. Cause
I know, because you could lose twice, and that's why the insulation of the first is there. Where I'm like,
I like Thomas' side just because I think Thomas has the highest ceiling of those guys, but not the lowest floor, and he's got the elite quarterback. So
here's my thought process. So let's say Keon Coleman busts. Okay, next year Brian Thomas is probably worth a 25 first still, right? Mm-hmm. He's not going to be too much more than that, and I think Keon Coleman, even if he has unless he has a Quentin Johnston type rookie season, he's going to be worth a 25 seconds. So you flip the 2, there's a lot more upside for potential to gain value than there is for you to lose.
It's one of those things, Dad, where I wake up one day and Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Kansas City Chiefs makes me want to put Worthy 4. I wake up the next day, Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars and the elite athleticism and the profile and the role that he can do in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And Brian Thomas Jr. makes me want to put him at wide receiver 4. And then I wake up another day, it's the weekend, long week, Sunday morning, and I'm like, damn, man, Ladd McConkey with Justin Herbert's going to tear it up. This is why we do tiers right here, right? Yeah. You're splitting hairs here. Like, it's pick your poison. Take who's cheapest out of these guys. That's so how I like to look at it.
The next tier is really fun because this is your guys that, and by the way, I mean, you don't have to get locked into things. I told you about the trade that I made with Zoltan where he wanted another share of J.J. McCarthy, and I already have Dak and Jordan Love, and Rodgers is my QB3. So I traded the 108 for DeVonta Adams and the 201, then traded the 201 for Debo and a third, and then so I ended up getting Ray Davis at the 305, Debo Samuel, and DeVonta Adams on a contender. So it's like, you don't have to get locked into those picks. You can turn them into multiple assets. But for me, and I think you're in that same area, like at tier 7 for me is Mike Evans, DeVonta Adams, Stephon Diggs. I think Cooper Kupp's right outside that area. So is Amari Cooper and Terry McLaurin. But these are like 6 veteran wide receivers that you can get in your rookie draft. You could get these guys for the 201, 202, maybe even 203. And even a late 25 first, maybe an early 25 second to go out and buy Mike Evans, DeVonta Adams, and get yourself into that area where when you look at those 2 wide receivers, especially Adams and Mike Evans, there isn't such a huge discrepancy between their production from what Tyreek Hill had. DeVonta Adams over the last 3 years he's led the league in touchdowns, tied with Mike Evans. Had 33 touchdowns. He's top 5 in receptions. He's top 5 in yards. And he's half the price of Tyreek Hill. You're on mute.
It's funny you say that because I know you see my my tweet where I said, why buy Tyreek Hill as a top 12 dynasty wideout when you can get Evans and Adams and
You can
top,
get
like in the
can you get
bottom
Adams
30
in a
half.
first for Tyreek? I mean, that's just
You
absurd,
can,
but I
and
think
it's
you
like,
can.
they're all Hall of Famers, first off. They're all elite talents. They all have good, fresh injury histories. Like, none of them have really had any bad injuries where it's like a Kupp, torn
Yeah.
ACLs, hamstrings left and right. Like,
Well-
those three cement themselves as the clear, like, moving forward best veteran wideouts, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Like,
You look at the
D-Hop
two.
was that guy, and then he, like, had the PED shit happen, but he's
Yeah.
still phenomenal. He just has no quarterback now. But
I mean, you look at them side by side and just take the profiles out. Touchdowns, 33. Tyreek, 29. DeVonta, 326 receptions. Tyreek, 349. So 20 receptions over 3 years. So we're talking 6 to 7 receptions difference. Yardage, 4,748 to 4,218. 500 across three years. You're talking 25 to 30 fantasy points difference between Davante Adams and Tyreek Hill. And Davante Adams you can get for the 201. Tyreek Hill's probably going to cost you the 105, 106. So
and
it's
the funny thing is, look at Adams' situation versus Tyreek Hill's, and it don't matter. That's how good
Yeah.
Adams is, man. Like, he is just...
Well, and I think Minshew would be a huge upgrade. I mean, he was still posting wide receiver 2 numbers with Aiden O'Connell and some absolutely abysmal games.
Yeah.
Has created an area where Gardner Minshew has supported wide receivers. Wherever he goes, he puts up points, he puts up yards, and I think Davante Adams is right there. And Mike Evans.
Absolutely.
I mean, Mike Evans, over that time, I mean, I know receptions, he ranks 17th, in yards, it's 9th, but he's number 1 in touchdowns. There's nothing, especially in 0.5 PPR, he belongs much higher than where he is. And Mike Evans is very, very cheap. You know, we're talking, if you're sitting at the 112 to 203, you could buy Mike Evans, and I'm doing
All
that
day.
all day long.
Yeah, exactly. And jumping into this next guy, because I'm excited about this guy, because he's another guy that's a value year after year after year, and he's like 22 years old still.
Who is that next guy?
Amari Cooper, baby.
You say he's 22
He
years old
doesn't,
still?
he doesn't
So-
age. There's that reoccurring joke
No.
on Twitter, like Amari Cooper just turned 25 today, and it's like 2023.
I don't have him in the same tier as Evans and Adams, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do have Diggs, Kupp, Cooper, and McLaurin very similarly valued. You know, like if Diggs was still in Buffalo, he's still up there. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
these guys, you look at them, and Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, and Cooper Kupp, you know, McLaurin and Cooper, they're going to be the primary targets there. I think Cooper Kupp has a nice bounce back this year because a lot of people, like, his demise was greatly overblown. Like I bought him for the 205 the other day, and I was like, okay, yeah, sure. You know, like, you want to go ahead and take a shot on Xavier Legette, that's fine. I'll take Cooper Kupp because he's going to win me a championship. You know, and I think these guys are becoming cheaper and cheaper. Great guys to insulate off, where you can, you know, trade off a guy like T. Higgins and get Amari Cooper in a first. Now all of a
Yeah.
sudden you have the same production and you get the insulation of next year.
I said it year after year. I'm not here to donate money to my teammates. I'm here to win championships, and that's why you got to make those type of moves, right? Like, you got to value those players over those rookies that haven't done much, especially when you start to get in that second round rookie range. But I just think Amari's a guy, super safe floor. Deshaun Watson hopefully bounces back. He's been horrible, but he averaged like 20 points per game last year. So if he can just do that, Amari can be that go-to guy. He's that space creator. He has like a floor of like wide receiver like 20, 25 and like a ceiling of like top 10. So it's just like easy value. It's like a wide receiver 3 or like a strong flex play. Same with Terry. I mean, Terry's that same type of mold, just like that. Has that top 10 upside. He's going to have the best QB he's played with yet. It's very good news for him. And the Commanders' offense is the best that they've ever been. So
Keep one, trade one, cut one, love one. They're going 4. Kupp, McLaurin, Diggs, and Amari.
I'd Diggs at the top. I'd love Diggs. I would keep Amari. Trade Terry and cut Kupp.
Okay.
Just
all right.
because
And
I think Kupp's injuries and stuff, it's just
Yeah,
like
they've
the other guys
added
are a
up.
bit safer.
Mhm.
So it's just like I think he could have a big fall off versus if one of those guys gets hurt, they still have value. But like if you're looking at it in a redraft lens, a 1 year lens, Kupp would probably be 2 there for me.
So the youth, in
Maybe
the same
1,
area-
honestly.
So the youth in the same area are guys that I want to do a quick keep trade cut as well as Ricky Purcell, Xavier Legette, and Rashee Rice. They're all considered in that same area of 204 to 206, both in my rankings and in Keep Trade Cut. Like, if you're looking at those three guys, who do you want?
Pearsall, then Rice, then Leggett.
Okay.
I just don't care for Rice. Like, I don't know. I never really thought he was that good. I think
we're in a weird spot, right? Like, if they didn't draft Xavier Worthy, when I was saying we're buying him everywhere, that was before Xavier Worthy. Now they have 3 wide receivers in there where someone the other day said, I can get a 25 first for Rice. Smash it. I don't care what it is. Just smash it. Get it out of the way. Now, if you can buy him for the 208, I'm taking that too, because I think there's a way for him to increase in value.
Yeah,
but a lot of people are trying to just sell for 302, and I'm like, why would you do that?
I saw some kid traded a 25 first for Rice in a third, and like, I'd just so rather the first. Like, there's zero risk in that first, and like Rice is like already missing 8 games. It's like,
and the dynasty wide receiver landscape is interesting because we said up until, and I have Coleman up there, but I mean up until like wide receiver 32, they are all young aside from Tyreek Hill. They are all high upside. Like, this is a great time to invest in wide receivers. Like, this is a great time where if you're not quite in contention to take Mike Evans, add a second to him and get Pickens or get, Ladd or get Pickens, or I said Pickens twice, or get Worthy and move yourself in that area. So next year you can start adding those other pieces. I keep saying it. I'm going to say it all off season. Upgrade the wide receiver, get younger at wide receiver. If you're not a smash contender, if you're a contender, I mean, Debo, Kupp, McLaurin, Adams, Evans, these guys are cheap. Yep. If you are looking towards next year, start to tear up off of those guys to get younger. Then you can add these running backs, and you're going to absolutely smash going forward. If there's one guy outside the top 40, even outside the top 50 on Keep Trade Cut, that you're like, dude, get me in on this value. I got to have some of this guy. Who is it?
You know who I'm going to say here.
We already know who you're going to say. I'm just setting you up.
I'm salty because the consensus has came around big time on him, and now you got people out there saying, like, making jokes about
56.
Like, everyone's making jokes now, like, oh, everyone thinks he's good now. Everyone's on the way. Like, we know who was on that OG wave. I got the receipts back from like 2020 on him. It's Dontavian Wicks, man. I think he can easily be the Packers wide receiver 1, and Jordan Love is just a freak talent with his arm. Like, he could throw the ball 50 times a game. I think Wicks is the cheapest of them, and he has the best chance to be like the highest ceiling of those guys. Like, he's just that wicked natural route runner. There's like a 2-minute clip of him just breaking ankles and getting wide open, and Love missed him on a few of those. So he could have had a much better season than we saw, but I think he played like 14 games and had like almost 600 yards. So he was pacing probably 800 yards. Mm-hmm. If he did that as a 5th-round rookie, like, that's impressive. Like, I mean, Pickens didn't do that. London's Pickens and those guys like barely did that, and they were like really high draft capital guys. So I think Wicks is just a guy, like, he's like 30 spots cheaper than Jaden Reed, and I literally think he's as good, if not better. So why not just take the cheapest guy that has the most potential, and he has the chance to be that Alpha X there? Yeah,
these are guys that are like in that round 14 to 17 of your startups, and I'm very willing to invest in him. Want to invest in Jalen Polk. I think could be the wide receiver 1 in New England. Mm-hmm. Like, these are guys where you get to Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, Dontavian Wicks, Jermaine Burton, Jahan Dotson, Khalil Shakir. Like, these aren't sexy names, but these are guys that, you get some depth in that wide receiver 50 to 60 range. A guy that I like to invest in that's cheaper, there's 2 guys, wide receiver 62 and 63, Jacoby Myers and Cortland Sutton. I think those guys are going to put up production. I like that. Where they're cheap. You can buy them for a late 3rd in your rookie draft. I traded the 402 for Jacoby Myers the other day. I was like, wow. Like,
what are you doing with Quentin Johnson?
That was my next one. He's wide receiver 64.
That's crazy.
There's only one thing you can do.
I don't care how bad he was. There's
only one thing you can do, and it's called buying. Like, you can't sell him. Like, what are you selling him for? I bought him for the 302 the other day. Let's look at this. I mean, you're talking about a guy that has round 1 draft capital. The 302, you're trading that for Roman Wilson, Troy Franklin, or Jermaine Burton. None of those guys have that same draft capital or pedigree. So it's like,
or that ceiling with Justin Herbert. So it's just like worth the risk.
They did not. That Ladd McConkey is not going to catch 15 touchdowns. That's just not what he is.
I think Ladd is going to be like Golden Tate, like that 100 reception. If he hits his ceiling, like that 80 to 100 reception guy, like 1,000 yards and like 6 to 5 touchdowns.
So,
and Quentin Johnson, if he figures it out, there's a great chance he sucks. Like that, but he's so cheap that why not, right? So
if you're playing Dynasty, you should be investing in either Quentin Johnson or Josh Palmer. Period. If you feel one or the other,
around, why not?
Yeah, like these guys both they're going in the wide receiver 60 range, 65 to 68 in that same areas like Gabe Davis, Demario Douglas, Luke McCaffrey. Take a shot with an elite level quarterback tied to them. You know what I mean? Like I think that's well worth the range of possibilities. So guys, this was a fun show. Make sure you guys go back and check out our trade show. Make sure you guys check us out on YouTube right now. We are putting out bonus content that you can't get. A lot of you guys, we're going to try to really push for 5 days a week type content where it's like on Twitter, we're doing it, but we want to get you guys a YouTube video, at least 2 pods, 2 or 3 YouTube videos, really get it so you guys can dominate. And on top of that, join the Patreon. That is like where you want to be right now. 300 plus guys in there talking shop daily, trying to get you guys into the best rooms. We have discussion groups for literally everything, whether it's trades, whether it's rookie drafts, everything that you would want to know, we have in there. We have it lined up. Snoog has organized it masterfully. And guys are in there just turning it into their own version of mini Twitter, because then they eliminate some of the noise. They get my content, they get Snoog's, they get guys talking shop, and they're not worried about the guys that are saying, go out there and pay a mid-first for Will Levis. We're not saying guys that are going out there and telling you, you know what, right now is the time to, invest in Malachi Corley. We're actually giving you the content to help you smash. So thanks again for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process. Sorry, I didn't mean to crap on Will Levis.